Too busy looking up scopes.
We're live. Hopefully, seems to be working. Okay.
Want me to test?
No, I think we're good.
Okay.
So today we're going to talk about Chapter 8, which is about user interfaces. Oh, I think I forgot to screen share.
Yeah, you don't have it up on.
No one wants to stare at me for.
Yeah, you don't have it up on that one either.
You know, I've been saying all day, seems like a long week, even though we didn't have anything Monday.
Yeah.
I had like a day off. Well, I came in for robotics, but I didn't have to work Monday, and it still seems like a super long week.
Smart boards. We were just talking about this today. How in the hell did Smart, how did they get these things in so many places? I don't know anybody that really likes smart boards at all.
They're actually nice.
They're all over the school district. We actually have InterRite.
I know,
older competitor, but InterRite's kind of Smart's taking over everything.
Well, I mean, I see them everywhere, and I have never known any teacher that are just like, "Oh man, I love my."
The younger elementary kids,
God, I hate this thing.
Elementary teachers really like them and actually do use them a lot. But like in the high school, I mean, some use them, but we're talking about replacing smart boards with like Microsoft Surface and a projector with a Miracast dongle, so you can just write on your Surface and project it, because that's all you're using it for, is to record what you write so you can post it online. You could do that with the Surface. You don't even need the Surface Pro, just the regular
the
cheap
Surface
works good for it. So, all right. So Chapter 8. Now, as with quite a few things in our textbook, some of the ideas and topics in here are a little dated, but there's some really good guidelines we'll go through, and then I've posted more modern readings about user interface. So user interface, the thoughts and principles have changed a lot in the last 20 years.
You got a great snapshot on that
Great.
one.
That's the frame it picks.
Yeah, that's the frame.
Mouth hanging right wide open. So
very nice.
It is kind of interesting. I left in content in these that is a little dated, just to compare and contrast of kind of what modern thoughts of user interfaces are versus even just 8-9 years ago, what the book said were good. Things have changed a lot, right? So we'll kind of take a look at this. So just summarize Chapter 7 we talked about last time, which was the data modeling, ER diagrams. We talked about the entities, the attributes, keys, multi-valued, degree of relationship. So that was the cardinality, which is right here. Associative entities, conceptual data modeling, and internet development. Just the idea that we can model data either for an entire system or for an internet application, or pretty much any application that stores data, which everything stores data. Otherwise, what's the point? And then we talked a little bit at the end about the alternative design strategies and that weighting table where we weight out each of the different factors and use that as a tool to decide which one is the best way to go. So Chapter 8, just a little bit, learning objectives. We're going to talk about designing forms and reports. The book is really heavy on this idea of forms and reports. Where does that phrase, what does it remind you of? Where do we use forms and reports a lot?
Business.
Well, yeah, in business, but what program do we create?
Access.
Yeah, Microsoft Access. So I feel like to a lot of people, creating a program is like making an Access database with a report and a form, and they're like, oh, look at this great program I made. I mean, yeah, it's a program, I guess. But they really talk a lot about forms and reports. In the most generic state, it makes a lot of sense. Forms, take in input, reports, report it back out. Might be a website, might be something completely different than a traditional business form and report, but the concepts are the same. We'll talk about some guidelines for formatting, more formatting, and then just some of the processes you can go through to create good interfaces and dialogues. So like dialogue boxes, you know, those kind of things.
Pop-up boxes.
Yeah, pop-ups.
Pop-up windows for incorrect entry.
Yeah, right. Which come and go in how people accept those in their use, you know, like I used a ton of them on our orbital shift JavaScript pop-ups because they're so easy to give user feedback through. But a lot of modern UIs don't use them at all. Pop-ups,
They can get blocked.
yeah, can be blocked, and like a lot of people, things popping up is kind of more of an old school
It's scary.
methodology. I got a question for you guys. Today I'm using my laptop and I'm teaching. I'm teaching a class with the projector, and a pop-up comes up, a Windows dialog, but it had a yellow triangle with an exclamation point in and said, Windows has encountered a severe error. Your computer will reboot in 1 minute. Please save all your work. That's not real, right? Like,
You want me to show you how to do it? So you shut down command.
that, so it is real? That's a real Windows dialog?
No.
No, someone,
Somebody in your
yeah.
classroom did it.
They sent you a
I used to do it all the time. You do
How do you do it?
batch file.
you can use a batch file, or you can just go into the command line, shut down, switch I, it'll bring up a GUI interface. You can say shut down, switch M, // whatever the name of the computer is, and then T for time, C for comment. You can write whatever you want.
Okay. Yeah, I told the class, I was like, this is not like a normal thing. Like, I've used Windows for a long time, and I've never seen it say you will restart in 1 minute. And it did it. It rebooted.
So the kid in the back that was giggling, just go back there and beat him.
Yeah, now I'm going to
the
have
living
to.
hell out of him.
I thought maybe it was just some kind of malware or something.
No,
but
actually in there, I had one on my batch file on my desktop called stop, because people figured out how to do it to me too. So they'd send me that, and I just click it, and all it is just shut down, switch A for abort, and it'll stop.
Okay, good to
What
know.
you want to do is input your social security number in there. Yeah, and
Yeah.
I'm gonna need the last four of your social, your credit card number, and the 3 numbers.
Yeah, right.
5 digits of code, so then I'll make.
I totally thought you were going to say the little paper clip came up or something.
Are you trying
I was like,
the world?
It really annoyed me though, because I was like just starting to teach, and then to reboot that laptop, log in, and it's so slow connecting to the network. It takes about 5 minutes till I can like be back to functioning. So once it rebooted, then I just had to like wait and wait and wait.
Solid state drives are amazing, aren't they?
Yeah,
Your
I know.
Surface boots up in what, 15 seconds?
This laptop they give us, I mean, it has 8 gigabytes of RAM, but it's a dog. And then connecting to the network is so slow. It takes forever to log into the
It
network.
takes a while here sometimes, too.
So it just, the combination of the two. And then once Windows boots, if I try to open Canopy is the Python IDE we use, it takes 2 minutes to load the first time. It's painful. That's why I carry around my Surface and I use it a lot of the
They can't
time.
get you with that on your service. They
Yeah.
can't on the school's computer.
So guidelines, we'll get to these. Human computer dialogues and the use of dialogue programming, more and more. Oh no, okay, now I'm back to the real stuff. Okay. It's like too many objectives. I like to list those, but then I'm always like, I'm not gonna spend 10 minutes talking about what we're gonna talk about, but that's how they teach you. Tell them what you're gonna tell them, and then tell them what you told them, you know, so that's
EPA format.
yeah, that's good teaching pedagogy, but it's just kind of annoying sometimes. So designing forms and reports. So we end the analysis phase and we're moving into the design phase of our SDLC. So we've gathered all the requirements, we've diagrammed the data that's going to be stored. Now we're moving into let's design the actual system. So at the end of the analysis phase, we should know the inputs and outputs of the system. Where can we see some of those? In a flow chart. What was the type of flow chart we made?
ER.
ER diagram is one good place. What was the other diagram we did? DFD, the data flow diagram. That especially shows what's coming in and what's going out. The sinks and the sources are, inputs and outputs. So during analysis, we don't at all care about what it's going to look like. Of course, design, we're moving. Now we need to actually care about what they look like. That's the next phase. So forms and reports are related to those diagrams, the data flow diagram and the ER diagram. Those shakes are good, aren't they? I drink them every day.
I asked my doctor, I'm like, it says you can't use this as a sole source of nutrition. She's like,
I drink it for breakfast every day.
they don't spoil. You throw them in bed. I'm like, throw
Yeah.
Like, oh.
They don't taste bad when they're warm. Like some things taste awful when they're warm. Anyway.
Yeah, like Monster.
Yeah, Monster tastes awful when it's warm.
Yeah.
So.
Some of them.
So then I had one out at work and the lady was like, oh my God, where do you, I'm like, don't worry, I eat.
Costco.
Yeah.
They come in like a 12 pack.
Yeah, no, it's.
It's Costco. It's a
24 pack.
I was like,
Yeah, and they're pretty affordable.
Yeah, I think it's like $20.
Cheaper than anything else you'd make for breakfast,
So
basically.
I looked at it.
I don't eat breakfast, so yeah, that's really cheap.
I don't usually either, so I drink that 180 calories and I'm good to go. All right, so form, we're gonna just give it a formal definition to a form. A business document that contains some predefined data and may include some areas where additional data are to be filled in. Now again, the book is looking at these all from a business standpoint, but any website or anything that has some data entry is kind of falls under this form umbrella. Yeah. In general, if you're putting some entries into a form, that matches one record in a database. So if you're signing up for a new account and you enter your first name, last name, all that, that's a form and it's going to go to one row. A record is the same as a row in the database. Now that's a pretty loose. It might go to 3 or 4 records in different tables depending on the structure, but in the simplest case. Report, on the other hand, doesn't take input. It's only giving output data. Basically, it's a passive document for reading or viewing data. So it
Like
maps.
students where tuition is greater than $10.
Right.
Bring back a report of anybody who had to pay over $10.
It matches just like what we've learned in Access. Everyone's done Access, right? You guys did data and computer modeling or whatever, but reports are backed by queries to get some data and then display it. It's the same idea here. Whereas the forms might be taking in data to save, but might just be taking in data as like a search to bring back a report. So a report often is going to pull from a whole bunch of records. Show me all the employees and their annual salaries. That would be a report that has a bunch of records. So designing forms. The idea here is we want to focus on the user. So, and we bring this back all the time. You don't design something that you think is usable. You want to design it so the person that actually has to use it thinks it's usable. In this part, it seems plainly obvious, but we've all used tons of software where it's very clear they never talk to a single person that uses it, or they wouldn't have done it that way. And Amber, I know you have stuff like that at the bank, right? I mean,
Cards.
yeah.
The
think
first
about the
time they put the
management
chip
studio.
card in the reader, they should have realized that you need, put it on the other end.
Yeah, right.
The only numbers you have to put in are the first 4. You don't have to put the last 4 in.
Yeah, that's a good point. I never thought of that.
Like the SQL management studio makes a lot of sense, but it's really hard to use. I mean,
Yeah.
It's not set up very well.
Right.
I think the one you see most is in people's cars and stuff, like in the layout of like your entertainment systems. And
Yeah.
I mean, it's like,
We'll get to them at the end. I'll show you some of the readings I posted, like it's kind of supplemental things. There's some good stuff that talks about, there's a whole book I read. I took a whole class on user interface design in computer science, and we read this book called The Design of Everyday Things, and it's linked in one of these articles, and it looks at all these cases of just boneheaded decisions for things like household stoves or just simple appliances that you're just like, why? Like, why did someone think this was a good user interface for it?
So I've completely remodeled my house because it wasn't the way I wanted it.
Yeah.
The washer and dryer were downstairs. I moved it upstairs. I put a shower in the downstairs.
Yeah.
Like it was ceiling all the way above the stairs. I'm like, someone should have put a shelf up there.
Yeah, right. So many of these things extend from software to all the way to like house design or any other thing. So designing forms, we keep kind of coming back to this. If you can prototype and let users use it earlier, you're going to get something better than if you do the Microsoft and let's develop a new interface for Windows 8 and work on it for 3 years and then put it out there and everyone's like, wait a second, like we don't like this. Yeah, and Microsoft, it took them a long time to learn, but they've learned now, and they're not doing things that way anymore. So
yeah, I was part of that insider thing.
Yeah,
man, like you got to update every.
And they changed it a lot
of it, yeah.
And then now we're just going to be getting incremental updates.
I mean, from the first beta that they pushed out of Windows 10 to what it is now, it's totally different. The start menu is different. The sidebar is different. I mean, all of that stuff. They changed.
Not to just keep getting sidetracked, but last summer, about 2 weeks before the release of Windows 10 came out, I was like, well, I'm going to install the very last version that came out. And I thought I downloaded the right one and installed it. Well, I'd actually downloaded one from January, and I installed it on my Surface Pro 3, and it went nuts and overheated, and it actually burned and detached the left-hand side of the screen turned yellow because it like burned in there. And I had like a month on my warranty, and they sent me a different one. But, it went crazy. But then I was looking online. That's been a big problem with a ton of those. Like I went into Best Buy and looked at their display. It's yellow on the left. But the one I got now, it's perfect. So anyway, for now. If I break it though, then I could get a Surface Pro 4.
Which are sweet. Yeah, they're better.
Here, talk to me.
Yeah, Frisbee. All right, so prototyping. So requirements determination. So as we start designing, we need to think who's going to use this. If we're going to be user focused, we need to figure out who's actually going to use it. What's the purpose? I mean, that's pretty obvious. When is it needed or used? And again, that has an effect on, is this something you have to use 60 times a day as part of your job, or the user does, or do they use it once a month? That changes a lot how it needs to be designed.
They're using it every day. You want it to just be like click, 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 click.
Right.
Not like,
And then just like I talked about that example with the radiation machine that they killed all those people with because they could push the buttons too fast, and it causes them to 10 times or 1,000 times the radiation. If it's something you're going to use every day, it needs to be able to be done fast because people are going to get very quick at doing it.
If it's something that you only do once a month, there are people like me that have to relearn it
Right.
every month.
Yep.
So the easier.
Those things might need more additional instructions to guide people through it.
if you would like to enter this, press here.
Right.
If you want to kill the person, press this button.
Yeah. Where does the form or report
Press this.
need to be delivered? How many people need to use the form or report? I mean, these are just some kind of general questions to ask as you're designing these. So prototyping, so you take your requirements in addition to some of those other kind of questions, and you try to design a prototype. Prototyping, there's a lot of tools and stuff you can do this without even making it working. I've talked about even PowerPoint can be used. You can put buttons And I could put a button on a PowerPoint slide, and when you click it, go to another slide, and it makes it kind of look like it's the user interface. I always found the PowerPoint prototyping pretty clunky. A lot of people think it's awesome. I'd rather just use, .NET Forms or something and mock it up and just don't write the backend code to make it work. Just fake it, or use a website and just fake it. You don't have to connect to a database. You don't have to do anything. When you click a button, just go to another static page that looks like it did what it was supposed to. And you can pretty quickly mock up a prototype. So you got your prototype, you let users review it, and they accept, or they say, no, this should be this way. I mean, this was how we built our software company, was, like I've talked about, getting something that wasn't very good, but people could get their hands on as early and as often. Now, if you're developing software for a business, this process can be easier because you have access to the user. If you're doing like what we did, where you're designing something from ground up and you don't have clients yet to look at it, and you're trying to do both, it can be trickier. If changes are requested, you make those changes and show them again. So it's just repeated over and over again. So design specifications are deliverables. We keep talking about, like, what is the output of this stage? So design specifications. So narrative overview. This is just kind of a word for word description of how it's going to work. Sample design, and then a testing and usability assessment. In that user interface class I took, we went through a heuristic evaluation of user interfaces that looked at the number of clicks. There's ways to quantify user interfaces. It took a lot of work. I remember making an 80 slideshow about the heuristic analysis of a pretty simple website I had created. Also, if you can get a prototype that's somewhat usable, which is exactly what we did in that class, you can videotape someone using it and use that as an assessment.
Make sure they know you're videotaping.
Yeah. Well, we had a very specific way to set it up. You had to put the video over their shoulder so you can't see the person. You give them a script of what they're supposed to do, and then you would analyze it. I mean, this is kind of a real specific UI thing. So, general formatting guidelines. And some of these are, pretty obvious, but so highlighting, use sparingly to draw attention where it needs to be. And that can be, like highlighting, like what would be a highlighter, but any bolding or extra color. If you use too much, it loses its emphasis. Blinking and audible tones. I mean, do we really see any audible tones anymore, other than Windows maybe dings at you on a rare occasion?
Yes.
I mean, they're just, this is where some of the datedness, the web used to be just dominated by sounds and stuff for things, and that's largely gone away, right? I mean, other than annoying pop-up sidebar videos or something that start playing some sound.
You ever have one of those scare you, like the ads that start talking, like sitting there doing something? It's like,
oh yeah, I have had that. Yep.
I don't have Flash Player on anything, and about 90% of them.
Yeah, that's killed a lot of it now.
I hardly ever get them anymore.
I get them all the time.
Yeah.
So methods should be consistently selected and used based on importance. There's a whole art to how you say things in user interfaces, and then the consistency is very important. I mean, I actually, in our company, ended up making a whole class of every dialogue output we had in our site, so that I could have one place to go look and say, okay, here I worded it this way. It needs to be worded exactly the same way, short of maybe a couple words. So then I even extended it to where it was multi-parts. It would use this certain introductory statement and then combine it with the rest. So if I wanted to change how that introductory statement, I would change it one place. And I kind of built this thing because it was such a pain to get the consistency. I mean, when you have 100 dialogue boxes across a website or something, it's
add more flour.
It's a chore. Yeah. So just a little table of highlighting, blinking and audible tones. I mean, don't do that. But color differences, intensity, size, font. Reverse video, I don't really know what they mean by reverse video. Boxing, underlining, capital letters. I think you don't want to yell at the person, right? Like,
no caps.
So
yeah, the color differences, you know, I hate these programs that, though it'll say like successfully completed installation or whatever, but it'll write it in red.
Right.
So you automatically think something's wrong, you know, and it's like,
you know,
what the hell happened?
I feel like in the last 10 years, we've taken a huge step back from a lot of the things on this list. It used to be everything was flashy and overstated. We've really, in UI design, have simplistic design, and which we'll see in the articles I posted, this whole concept of UX design, user experience design. Like, we've taken a big step back, and for the better, like, largely.
Yeah, everything's real flat and which it's kind of ironic when you think about it, because the UI was really like flashy and everything else, but you looked at it on a kind of crappy display.
Yeah.
And now we've got these
now we have good displays
and
that,
all flat and like no graphics on it.
That's a good point.
So, reverse video, a method of display that causes a portion of the display to appear like a negative of the regular display.
Yeah.
So, bright video.
Let's say display like 19 times in there.
Yeah.
Another, you know.
Yeah.
So here's a form, just to show some highlighting. You know, these are capitalized. Here, I guess it doesn't really look like yelling. It looks okay to me.
I mean, that's kind of like a header or something. So that's,
yeah.
I mean, but if you were putting out like a dialogue like "Thanks for shopping with us" and it's all caps,
Yeah.
you'd be like,
you know, of course, boxing, and then they have font. Like, these are bigger, and I mean, this isn't a bad little UI for a business application, you know, like this isn't obviously a consumer. This would be a regular Windows application. But a form, although, is it really a form or is it more of a report? But, okay, so we're more formatting guidelines. So text, mixed upper and lowercase. I mean, I always struggle with some things like, you know, is it a title? Like here, you know, I like to capitalize every word in most cases. A lot of people don't, and then I think it looks weird, you know, so.
I think that's from like camel text in programming. Yeah, like.
Yeah, I'm so used to doing camel case on everything.
Like, we're doing that ethics class, and we've been having to write papers and stuff, and I keep capitalizing it, like. Yeah, and it's like, quit that, you know.
Do you know what camel case is? Okay.
Little letters.
Yeah, capitalize every word.
Yeah. Even if
I just want to make sure everyone knows what we're talking about. So use double spacing if space permits. I mean, these are just like almost as like document formatting. Spaces between paragraphs, that's, you know, Microsoft Word does a pretty good job of staying with what's kind of the current trend. I mean, that's sort of how they do it by default, right? Is put a double space between paragraphs.
Those people usually just go by what Microsoft says.
Yeah, I mean, they're almost setting the standard, right? Like for document formatting.
Yeah, for Word, definitely.
Yeah. Left justify text and leave a ragged right margin. You know, for a while, people got really into justified text. Really anymore, the only time you should see justified text is sometimes in 3-column layouts because it looks better, but justified text is hard to read because it has extra spaces between words and it doesn't flow right. So just regular left justification. Not wrapping words with hyphens, you know, I mean, you could say this for writing a paper, right? I mean, a lot of these are the same. Abbreviation and acronyms, like don't use SDLC on something that people are going to have no idea what that
Don't
stands for.
Don't overuse jargon.
Now, if you're using SDLC in a systems analysis book that's been talking about it over and over, that's okay, you know, but just, yeah, don't use jargon. Don't use engineer speak when your users aren't engineers. There are times, though, where it makes it shorter and a lot cleaner. You just need to use it judiciously. All right, so that was just general text. And as obvious as these seem, look around online and you can find tons of examples of people that don't go the common sense route and think they've got a better way to do it, and it looks like garbage. So tables and lists. So of course, meaningful labels. Highlighting that form we had the bolded headers. And then this is a big one, which a lot of people neglect. If you're going to do like a printout report or something, make sure you get those headers on every page. Otherwise, the second page is just meaningless data. Same thing if you're going to have something where you're paging through data in an application. Ideally, now this is something I fought for 4 years in our software company, if you're going to have scrollable data on the web page, you want to be able to see that header no matter how far you scroll. That's not easy to do. I could never find a satisfactory way to code that. You can do it with JavaScript. There's a lot of ways, but none of them that I could ever find were robust enough to work on all browsers and not do funky things. But I mean, if you're we'd have things where you're displaying through 5 pages, you kind of lose what it is when you're way down there. So some of these are easier said than done.
That and like on mobile devices, it's really a pain to get stuff to.
Yeah.
Right there, scrolling down.
Yeah.
Have your screen full time.
Right. Responsive design is what they call that, for making it format properly on the mobile. Now, if you use a good framework like Bootstrap, and you fit within the formats of that, it'll do responsive design for you. It'll wrap. But then, you know, we have a website for our robotics team, and one of the mentors comes to me and says, well, we got to do something about how this looks on a phone. And it's a WordPress site. And they're like, we're using a responsive theme, but it's not working. And I look at it, and I didn't do any of the work on the website. Someone else did, but I'm looking at it. The whole site does work responsively, and the right column wraps, and it like looks perfect. But someone put a header image at the top that's like gigantic and wide the whole width of the web page. It can't wrap.
Yeah.
So it stays wide, and then below it, everything goes to the right width. And I'm like, well, we just need to come up with an image that's in pieces so it can do something different, you know? So I don't know.
Is it the auto scan?
Yeah, I don't know. I just haven't really messed with it yet. I think if you just made it 4 images, that would be at least a start, so it could stack them, you know, if you want them all to show, or just ideally you'd want it just to show like the left one and just get rid of the other ones when you're on the mobile.
I just built a mobile site. It's usually a lot easier, and they're kind of just broken down to work on the devices. And
I mean, that's like our software company. We just made a mobile version, and I detected if it was a mobile browser and pushed you to the mobile version, and it was a totally separate site.
Yeah.
Using some of the same components, you know, like, but that's a pain too. So it just depends.
Yeah, I don't know. It seemed like it was more of a pain to try getting the regular website to kind of shrink down and look good.
Yeah.
Versus just like, hey, this is a condensed version of this site, and it works just fine on that.
Yeah, there's trade-offs.
Yeah.
The key to having the 2 sites, like I did a lot of reworking a couple years in to come up with these classes that could contain everything, and then it's just a matter of the final output, how to display it. So much of that was embedded in individual pages. That makes it impossible to have 2 versions. So more about tables. So sort row in a meaningful order. I mean, again, this is obvious. Don't put the most important data on the far right end of a table. Place a blank line between every 5 rows in long columns. I mean, I don't know. Like, these are somewhat arbitrary. I think some of them are good ideas. Multiple columns should be sorted vertically. So columns should have 2 spaces between them. I mean, we're getting pretty specific here. Don't cram them together, right? I mean, obvious. White space on printed reports for users to write notes. If you're doing something that's printing reports. I mean, this is a big change from when the book, I mean, we try to get away from having to print reports, right? Though, I spent a lot of time with Orbital Shift trying to get our schedule in the software to be printable, because we actually used a kind of a calendar widget that I worked within to display events. If you just tried to print that page, it didn't work. It would garble it. And the person who developed that, his solution for printing did not work for us. So I had to hack the crap out of this thing to get it to print, because businesses were insistent they have to have a printed paper schedule. So
if you don't have somebody who feels what you just use a computer or something.
yeah, exactly. I mean, it makes sense. It makes sense, but it would have been easier if they didn't want it. Not just because it was so hard to print it, but the whole idea of using an online scheduling is that it's dynamic, and that it can change all the time. And if you print it, it's not updated. But you know, a lot of times they print them and stick it on the like hostess thing, so they know who's coming in. You know, so even if they're printing it that day, so I had to have like a daily report of who was coming in. I had to have the regular weekly. So, I mean, even as we're phasing out printing, it still happens. Single typeface, so don't use Comic Sans and Times Roman and a whole bunch of different things. More about, avoid overly fancy fonts. There's your
Old English.
Comic Sans. I'm just kind of clipping through these because they're not, I think you learned a lot about this stuff in computer modeling, right? Like a lot of it was formatting and how to format those spreadsheets and things. So numeric data is usually better aligned, right aligned than left aligned. And then if you want to get all the decimals to line up, that's why it's better right aligned, because you're going to have a fixed decimal points. Like if it's dollars, you're going to do 2 decimal points. If you left align, you can't quantify which numbers are bigger as easily. Just regular text, you left justify. Now Excel does all this by default, right? If I give it a number format, it right aligns it. If I give it an accounting format, if I do other, it left aligns it. I mean, they follow a lot of these guidelines. Break long sequences of alphanumeric data into small groups. That can be helpful. So here's some examples. And again, I mean, this looks like something almost just right out of a spreadsheet, right? But these are lined up. Numeric data are left justified. Wait a second. That's not right.
Oh, no, it's showing.
Right, justify numeric data.
Look at the on the right.
Oh, this is the bad one. Poorly designed form. Got to read more carefully. Yeah. So that looks horrible. I can't tell that this is bigger than this as easily. There's no column headers. So here it's nicely formatted, right aligned. This is using like an accounting format where negatives are in parentheses. Yep. Now, it depends what medium you're coding in. It can be a lot harder than you'd think to make something look like this. Like even just to make this on a web page, it's not as easy as you'd want it to be. I mean, the amount of time I've spent formatting and moving things pixel by pixel, and the amount of time I've spent doing things like holding up a piece of paper on my computer screen to check if they're lined up right. You know,
and then you run in another browser and it doesn't work.
Exactly.
You got 15 other problems.
That's where the paper would come in. Look at it on Chrome, and then look at it on Internet Explorer, and wait, it's like 2 pixels off on Internet Explorer, And then you have to start hacking the CSS to get it right. It's getting better. 10 years ago when I used to do web work, it was a million times worse.
It's getting better.
The browsers are much closer, but
Yeah, Internet Explorer's gone, so now it's getting better.
well, 6 years ago when I started the company, we had quite a few businesses that only used Internet Explorer 6. And to support Internet Explorer 6 is very, very difficult. It's not at all standards compliant. I mean, it was a wreck. And we tried for a couple years, and eventually we had to just draw a line in the sand and say, we cannot support it anymore. It's not possible. Chrome was out that whole time, but Chrome came out in about 2008 or 9, I think.
Chrome's still got some problems though, since it's only 32-bit. There's still certain things that won't run in it.
Yeah.
And, you know, what I mean,
So
but-
it doesn't support Java anymore.
oh, it doesn't. Oh, I didn't know.
Even by Internet Explorer 10, though, 10 was pretty compliant. I didn't have a ton of problems with Internet Explorer 10. Not much.
I haven't.
I was gonna say Edge is supposed to be all HTML5, I think.
Yeah. So here's just another table that's showing some of these principles. All right. So now kind of stepping past the forms and the reports and some of that formatting. So into this, what they call interfaces and dialogues. So focus on how information is provided to and captured from users. Again, this user focus. So dialogues are analogous to a conversation between two people. So that's communicating from me to you, and then back and forth. They're going to respond. Are you sure you want to delete this event?
No.
Yes, no.
Delete it.
A good human computer interface provides a unified structure for finding, viewing, and invoking the different components of a system. I mean, that's, yeah. We all have tons of examples where it's not unified, right? Like it works one way here and it's clear someone else designed the other part. Again, this keeps coming up, user-focused activity. So designing these interfaces, just like our reports and forms, focus on the user. So it's just goes right along with our form and design process, kind of side by side, right? They're parallel. We prototype it, collect information, make the prototype, look at how usable it is, refine it, have it looked at again. So this is the same process. What do we deliver? The design specifications. Ah, this looks kind of familiar, doesn't it? Exactly the same things again. So sample design, usability statement. So designing interfaces. So I mean, the way they're defining interfaces is like all the stuff that's connecting the forms and reports, right? And that's kind of the overall layout of like an application or a website. And then the dialogues are that communication part. Oops. So designing layout standard to paper-based forms and reports. So this is, again, if you're dealing with a business and they have paper forms, it can be nice to mirror those, unless they suck, right? So, I mean, you don't want to just be like, well, they use this, so let's make our program look like that. They might hate the way that works. So, but the general idea of how paper works, it's good if you map that in that left to right, top to bottom. Yeah, culturally, like I guess if it was Chinese, they do it backwards or something, right?
Right. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah, right to left.
Yeah.
Yeah, so for English at least. And then I'll show you in those articles, there's a ton of like really detailed research about where people's eyes look at the screen. And if you can take that into some place, like you naturally look at the upper left always first. And then there's kind of a path you take as you look.
Flashing on the screen.
All right.
He's shiny.
So flexibility and consistency are primary design goals. Consistency, again, is a big theme here, but flexibility to accommodate as many different functionalities is important. So you want to be able to easily move around the interface. Again, kind of obvious. If we're filling into these forms, data should not be permanently saved until the user explicitly requests this. That's something some sites and things have moved away from, where it just kind of saves it as you do it. And in general, I think people are pretty well adapted to that, but I recently was working on a website that used Weebly. Has anyone ever used Weebly? It's one of our school STEAM site is created in there, and I needed to make some pages in there, and it's a drag and drop web interface. But there's no, as you do stuff, like if I delete a header, it's gone. There's no undo. And I actually Googled it because I was like, there has to be some hidden way to undo this. No, there's not. There's no undo. It saves it as you do it. So if I drag something in and move it and screw it all up, no going back.
That sounds like
Their support said, well, if you accidentally delete a whole page, you can email us and we can try to retrieve it for you. I'm like, that's horrible. I mean, I don't mind the autosave as long as I can go back at the minimum one step. Like most of the Google stuff, you can undo one thing. Like if I delete an email, I can undo it for 5 seconds. Is it 30? Yeah, and if I delete a calendar event, there's an undo. I can only do one. Ideally, you should be able to go back like you can in Word or anything else, a whole bunch of steps.
I use Blogger, and that's another one that it auto saves and everything for you. And it was not me using, my fiance was using it. She had to make a blog for her class, and I ended up just writing a website for her and doing it that way. I was like, this is 50 times harder than just making the website.
Probably not to her.
Well, not to her, but for me, I was just like, what the hell is this thing doing?
As things have moved online, the autosave is become, and there's good reasons. If you lose internet connectivity and you worked on something for 20 minutes and it can't successfully, re-handshake without logging you out, that's gone, So there's reasons why a lot of web things autosave. You can only lose so much then if it's continually saving.
And a lot of the new programs are doing that too. I know the Word 2016 on this does it now, and
okay,
a bunch of them were starting.
I haven't done the newest Office stuff because for modeling they're still using 2013, so I stick with what I have to teach in there. But each key and command should be assigned to one function. I mean, that's kind of obvious, right? But
copy and cut.
Yeah.
I have a story about that. I've worked at the bank for 20 years, and when 18 years ago, was tellering, the system we used, you could use 9 to exit the system. Like, why would you have one button to exit the entire system? And so I always got really mad about it. When I came back to tellering, now that 9 is to go back to your previous, whatever you're looking at, you can print a statement or a balance or something. And I swear, every time, not every time, but if I hit it too fast, if I hit that 9 too fast, it'll take me out of the system. And I swear there must be residual code in there left over from when that 9 was to exit the system.
That's funny.
Yeah, but why? I was really glad that they changed it so that you actually have to click in 2 places to exit the entire system instead of, and
then I would highly recommend, like, if you're going to use keyboard shortcuts and stuff, follow the standard. Yeah. There's some, usually Control Tab will unindent on most IDEs, and there was one I used where it was something completely different, and it drove me nuts. There was an application I used not too long ago where Control Z wasn't undo. It had a different undo. Somewhere in the distant past, there was a program I used, I don't know what it was, but that you could center with Control C. And there is still occasion where I'll put my cursor on a title and I'll press Control C and expect it to center. And it's something I probably haven't used for 15 years, but I used enough where that is still stuck in my memory. Even though I use copy
all day.
100 times a day, but
Did you use WordPerfect?
that might be what it was. I think it was WordPerfect in the 90s probably. And I mean, that's 17 years ago probably since I even had WordPerfect. But that's stuck in my brain.
That's another program. I've never understood how that went away. Like it did so much more stuff than Word and
Yeah,
other stuff.
it was way better than Word
Oh,
was
yeah.
back then.
And then, Word just kind of like killed it one day and it was gone. It was like, what happened?
He bought it,
Yeah.
closed them down.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I think my computer still has it, but I've never personally used it.
I think it's still out there, but
Yeah.
it's some really bastardized version of it now.
I think I was telling you guys I fired up that 286 with Windows 3.0, and it has Microsoft Works with a GUI, but it has WordPerfect, the old just purely text-based one. Now that is kind of like people that like to use Vim or Emacs for code editing. If you know all the keyboard shortcuts, you can be super fast with those.
Well, it's like using Photoshop. I mean,
You
people.
can click and point at anything, but if you know how to go like
Oh,
Control T.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
mean, if you know all the shortcuts, you can get so much more stuff.
I watch
done
kids
on
use
Photoshop.
Autodesk Inventor
Oh yeah,
that are pretty
I
good
use
with
that.
it, and like,
Yeah.
holy cow, like they
They
know
know
all
all
the
the
shortcuts
shortcuts
and
and that, yeah.
they're quick. So data entry, entry never require data that are already online or that can be computed. So some of this even goes back to what we talked about in databases. Don't ask someone to enter how old they are if you are storing their birth date, because we can take their birth date and we can figure out how old they are. Would be redundant from a user interface standpoint and redundant from a storage standpoint. Default values, and we dealt with this a lot in the software company. If there was things that we thought we could predict what they wanted to be in there, put them in there because it saves them a lot of time. Make sure the units you want. Use character replacement when appropriate. That's like it shows you the phone number, and as you type it replaces it, like kind of like the underscores and those kind of things. That's one type of character replacement. Now again, doing masks on user input for websites to do those kind of things is a huge pain. I spent a lot of time on that. HTML5, there's a lot of stuff to make that a lot easier that didn't exist when I started building the software. Captioning, provide formatting examples. So that's like you could literally next to the phone number box show them what format you want the phone number in. Right. Now, the very best input systems will take it a whole bunch of ways and internally format it to what they want. But it's not that easy to accomplish. So context sensitive help. So controlling data input. So we want to reduce data entry errors. That's in designing, and we talked about this some in database, but in designing any kind of user interface, you can catch errors at multiple levels. The easiest is to catch it before they even enter it. So that's the first layer. Prevent them from entering it wrong. Then you can catch it kind of in the application logic. And then the database is the final check. But the earlier in that process you catch it, the better.
Restrict what they can do.
So what this kind of requires is anticipating what those user errors might be and then trying to build the interface to help prevent those and give good feedback and make it easy to correct those.
Give it to somebody, have them try to break it.
Right. Now there's a ton of examples online where you get pretty poor feedback about required fields or ones you entered incorrectly.
Username or password is incorrect. Well, which?
Yeah.
You know why they do that though, right?
Security.
It's more
Yeah.
secure, but
But still.
yeah, it's
I like
annoying.
ones where it's like, this is not the correct password. Thank you.
So table, the next table, and then we'll have a couple things. So types of data errors, so adding additional characters to a field, losing characters. Transcripting is going to be the big one. You just enter invalid data into it. Reversing the sequence of one or more characters in a field. I mean, that's like fat fingering it almost, right? Or now, I mean, a lot of these are like almost implying that you have like a secretary mass entering data into a system, right? I mean, it depends what kind of user interface you have, like how many transposing errors you're going to have or those kind of things. So here's a big table of ways to detect errors. Class or composition, test to assure the data are of proper type. Like, and I'm going to just use a lot of web examples because I don't know how many of us are going to, I don't know. I just feel like almost most things you're going to code these days are web-based. There's a lot that isn't, but I mean, a ton of what your people are going to do is going to be web-based.
Well, you can write so many things on the web for
Right.
everything now. I mean, it's so much easier to scale it.
Right.
Right.
So on the web, it's pretty easy to make a text box, so it only takes numbers. And if I try to type letters in it, it just doesn't do anything.
Which is awesome when they change the coding for the authorization codes and all of a sudden there's letters and.
Oh, and it doesn't take letters? Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's good if you limit it correctly. So if you don't want numbers, don't allow numbers. If you don't want letters, but if you need both. Test to see if the value combinations of 2 or more data fields are appropriate. That's a little more complicated, but they're just saying, like, if you can say, okay, they entered data here and here, can we do a check to make sure that combination makes sense?
Reported 1766.
Right. The example there, like quantity sold, like if they enter 1,000 for $100,000 tractor, can you do some validation to say that combination is, you're never going to order more than,
1,000.
this many. Expected values, so
Limit 5%.
test to see if data is what is expected. I mean, a lot of these are not necessarily that easy to do, but we can easily test for missing data. Standard format, so like this is what in web programming, but a lot of things you call masks. Can you mask the text box so that it shows them what to enter, and as they enter it replaces it? That's a mask. A range, so if you're asking someone to enter a birth date, can you check it needs to be between 19 whatever, or they didn't enter it right. So the more of these checks you can do right away, the better.
I always love that on like gaming sites where it says enter your date of birth and you scroll down and let you pick like 1899.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, on the iPhone, you put in 1970, right?
Yeah.
Let it brick it.
Yeah.
No, I'm not ruining mine, but I know about it.
Yeah. Reasonableness, so like assure reasonable data. Like in our software system, we didn't let anyone enter that they made more than a 3-digit dollar per hour. Like if they entered $1,000 per hour, that's not reasonable, right? Like, does anyone that's buying our software system make $1,000 an hour?
I'm gonna say, you
know,
never know. The CEO of Microsoft might.
Yeah,
be
if
there.
they buy our system, I would have changed it and allowed more. Self-checking digits, test where an extra digit is added to a new numeric field. Size, too few or too many characters. Like, I mean, a lot of these, if you do a template, it'll be testing for size, like of a social security number. You can bundle those together. And then values, if you're going to ask user, and we talked about this in database, if you're going to ask user to enter what state they're from, don't have them type the state, because you're going to get Montana, you're going to get MT, you're going to get Montana misspelled. You know what the 50 states are, so force them to pick from the 50 states, because then you know it's good data. They might pick the wrong one, but what they pick is going to be...
It's still data.
And then now we're seeing more and more websites where you don't even pick the state, because you enter the zip code and you can make a call to tons of services and just get the state. So
and county and cities. And
yeah,
stuff.
right. So we don't.
Which part of the city?
Yeah,
we don't need to enter that in a lot of cases. So you're preventing another room for error then. Okay, so then feedback back to the user. Status information. So try to keep them informed of what was going on. This was a big thing with our software company. There was certain things that they would do on our website that might take 5 or 6 seconds, which is an eternity for a web app, but that was just reality. They need to know,
Using Internet Explorer.
is it working, or did it crash? Is it hanging? What's going on? So even if it's just a little spinny, something
Come
to
on
tell
and say,
them.
please wait.
Yeah.
Yesterday.
I love the ones that come up and say, please wait, this is gonna take a while.
Right. Now, as we know, like a lot of things have a scrolling progress bar. They're wildly inaccurate and almost impossible to calculate.
I love the one. I had one where it was like, it was coming out, it was green, and I was like, all right, we're making progress.
And then it just
moves
starts,
out, it's like, oh.
The Microsoft ones just start over, right? They go and go and go and go, and then it just starts over and goes in. I helped develop one for a ice sheet modeling application to try to predict how long the simulation was going to take, and these would take quite a few minutes. It's almost impossible to accurately predict that. You're taking a pretty wild stab at. You can do historical, like how much progress has it made and how much do we think is left, but all it takes is a couple background tasks to start running and slow it down, and that's way off. So here's where they're saying a second or two. If anything takes longer than a second, you really should give some feedback, because people, in 286 days, you knew to wait, but now people expect things to be pretty quick.
Turn on some elevator music.
Yeah. Prompting cues. So specific cues to prompt people for what to do. Error messages. I still run into websites where they like output the internal error into the error message. Is like, don't do that.
You ever logged into Moodle when it's not working and you get the whole list of JavaScript errors?
Yeah. There's a lot of reasons. One, that's horrible for the user experience. Two, sometimes those are pretty big security flaws because it shows internal workings of the system you don't want anyone to see. So
copy paste. Thank you.
Don't tell the user they're an idiot. Nudge them towards the right result.
ID 10T error. Please check my keyboard.
Use good terms. Be consistent. This is where I said that class I made for the dialogues also was for our error messages, so I could make them consistent. Providing help. So how do we help the users? So try to think about it from the user's perspective, not from. It's really easy to say, God, why are they so stupid? Like, I designed this. It's easy to use. Why can't they use it? I even found myself doing that at times where it's like, I just feel like, no, like they need to be able to use this. I think it's fine and it's their fault. But you got to look at it from their standpoint. There's probably a reason they're stuck.
It makes a lot of sense.
And if it is that they're an idiot, if you have enough idiots, you better design the system to work well for idiots, That's saying it kind of harsh, but that's just the reality. You have to look at who your user base is.
It's hard to idiot-proof stuff because idiots are so darn ingenious.
Yeah. They find a way to break it, right?
Sometimes with my grandma, I try to show her how to do something on her phone or on the computer. I'm like, no, you can just do this. She's like, and then she's like all over the place. I'm like,
Yeah, I know. It's frustrating.
Yeah, then my dad calls it sailor-proof because he's in the Navy. He was on a submarine and there was valves on a submarine, and what they would build these wrenches that were only like this long, so you could never over torque something.
That's funny. You can only get so much leverage.
Exactly. You could never break anything with them.
So, providing help, simplicity. You want nice short messages. You want it to be organized. If you can show explicit examples for how they should be doing it, that's helpful. Now, that being said, our orbital shift never had any support materials because we never had time to make them. So support was call us and we'll tell you how to do it. Because it's a lot of work. It's like a full-time job to maintain a set of help manuals, because every time I change something, that has to be changed.
I'm just picturing them calling and getting on the phone with you and be like,
Yeah.
your voice is so soothing.
I guess, yeah, right. I guess we did have a lot of tutorial videos. I don't know why we had videos, but we didn't even have a basic help manual. But
because I think
I don't
more
know.
people learn stuff from watching a video.
yeah,
Like you can put out a help manual and stuff, and I can almost guarantee you probably 20% of people that are actually looking for it would
Yeah.
read it. And
And I
then
guess-
other people would definitely watch
This is another thing of putting yourself in the user's shoes. Like, I hate help videos.
Yeah.
They take too long to watch, and I want to just like scan some text and find the snippet. So I'm the opposite. So when I was like, my business partner, why are we having all these help videos? We need, like, I would want it to be the other way. But you're right. I think 80% of people prefer the videos. So, I mean, you got to think of it from the user's
Videos,
shoes.
interactive text.
Yeah, even better. All right, so context-sensitive help. This is like the little question mark next to it, and you can click it, and it'll pop up some help, like right specific to that. That can be really useful than searching through a manual. A big thing that you see is if you do leave something that's not like context-sensitive and you go to a help, it should put you back where you were, or be in a pop-up or something. I think that's even better because then you can look at the help and still use it.
Press F1.
Sure.
Like Windows.
Yep.
And I think Chrome does something like that.
So here's an example of a paper-based form. Why does this fit in here with help? I get this just like randomly in the wrong spot. Here's a nice form. How
So we
about
need a
that?
tutorial video. On
I don't know why I put this here.
Remember, kids, that's why we don't drink when we make slideshows.
I probably moved it and it auto-saved and then,
Yeah.
It wouldn't let you undo.
Yeah.
It's okay, we understand.
So dialogues. So dialogue is information is displayed to and obtained from a user. I mean, I always think of it's a little broader than just your pop-up dialogue window, but that's like the easiest kind of way to think of it. Consistency in actions, keystrokes, terminology. Again, there's a lot of overlap here, right? What do we think the three-step process is going to be?
Prototype.
The same. This only says assess usability, where the other had
Same difference.
one more had feedback. I mean, it's the same thing. So we're really nailing that. So the sequence of a dialogue. So define the sequence. Understand, the user. What task are we doing? What all of these characteristics, obviously. Make a diagram. So the diagram helps us. We'll design it obviously using box and line. So you can do it's kind of like a flow chart. So the top, unique display reference number. The middle has the name or description of the display. The bottom contains display reference numbers that can be accessed from the current display. So it's just, if you look in the book, it shows this process a little more, a way of kind of connecting these together. So here's an example, kind of showing that. So, building prototypes and assessing usability of the dialogue. So, activities are often, I can't talk today. Activities often are optional. Task is simplified by using graphical design environment. So this shows a flow of diagrams here, which is kind of what I was saying. It's not really like a flow chart. It's like a tree, but this is showing how they navigate through. So this is the login screen. It's really small up there. This is the main menu. From here, they can go to customer information, order status, salesperson, and you can kind of flow through. So customer, and you can go through and show as they step through your interface what all the pages or screens, whatever you're designing are. And then they're numbered, 0, 1. These are level at a whole number level, 2, 3, 4, and then these sub down. That's how you can connect them back. So 2.1.1.4. So back to our friend, the Pine Valley Furniture Web Store. And this is just a real quick look in this. So design guidelines that they're setting out. Navigation via cookie crumbs. That's dated, right? How many websites use cookie crumbs anymore? Yeah, tracking cookies, but we don't, and they're not usually called cookie crumbs. What are they usually called? No, you're thinking of a cookie in the browser. They're talking about breadcrumbs. So it's where if I go to a page and then a sub page and then a sub page and then a sub page, I can go back through every layer. That's still out there a lot, but that has been greatly diminished. It used to be every site you built, right at the top, you put a breadcrumb, and in like ASP.NET, there's a breadcrumb widget you can just drop in there and it does it for you because it was so common. But I've seen a definite pullback from this breadcrumb idea, but the book calls them cookie crumbs for whatever reason. So yeah, if you wanted to trace a path to go back through, I'd rather go back picking up the cookies than the pieces of bread.
Or you
So.
really could eat either one. We're picking them off the ground.
If you're ET and they're Reese's Pieces, maybe it should be a Reese's Pieces trail.
Then you just break off the hard.
So basically, the idea is that you're showing them where they've been so they can backtrack, which is a good concept. It's just, I don't know. It was kind of an abused thing, I think, where just everyone assumed that was the way to go. They can go back to where they previously visited. It can show where they have been. What I see a lot more now is less tracing through their path, but just showing, like, especially on a lot of shopping sites, like I'm in this category, I can click and get to the parent category of that. Like I'm looking at AMD processors on Newegg. I can probably jump to just the processors page. It's pretty much a breadcrumb, but they've reworked them some, so it's a little different. But so e-commerce application, more guidelines. So lightweight graphics, and again, this is sort of data. We don't worry as much about these things. It used to be like, really, don't put too many pictures because it's too slow to open. I mean, now we're seeing websites that are fully dynamic with video built. I don't even know exactly how they do it, where it's like not a player, it's like the whole thing's moving and
Flash.
No, they're not Flash though. There's some other way to do it.
Oh.
Do automated GIF.
Well, yeah, but I'm talking about even more. I can't think of a specific example, but I've seen some designs lately that I'm like, wow, this is a step forward in like the interactivity of the page. Forms should be clearly labeled. That's pretty obvious, kind of what we talked about, clear errors. You know, they're just setting up some overlying guidelines for this project. Which fields are optional, which are optional, and then what the ranges are. Again, if you have a text box that's allows 0 to 100, it's nice if you tell them it allows 0 to 100. Template-based HTML. I hope no one ever builds a website anymore that doesn't have a template. So you guys in database, I built a template for you, right? But I used Bootstrap to be the original template. So abstract your design so you have one thing that you can change that affects the whole site. If you're using CSS in any not super dated web development paradigm, you should be doing this. Maintenance is the big thing there. You don't want to have to go change 25 pages because you want it to be dark gray instead of dark blue. ASP.NET, you use like they have a master page. It's if you've used Dreamweaver, they have templates.
Yeah.
But Dreamweaver, I've hated it forever. I don't know why it still hangs around.
That's
But
the only thing I've ever used for web design.
yeah, I don't like it.
I like the ones that they write the CSS into every page.
Yeah.
It's like.
So I'm going to skip the summary because I want to just quickly point you at these articles. So I did one just to Wikipedia. Wikipedia is often a good place to start. This whole idea of user experience design, UX design, I have never been trained in this. It was a new term to me, but it's super hot right now. I keep talking to people in industry where they're like, are you teaching your kids UX design? I'm like, oh, it's been around, it's just kind of formalized. But the idea is that we're focusing on the user. I mean, it's really what it's getting to. So you can kind of read through here, and they give you a lot of, kind of guidelines about what this is.
The CS degree, you got to take three different user interface, user experience, and then there's another one that kind of combines the two.
Okay.
Now to
All
graduate.
right. So they've changed it. They've moved.
Well, they've also, because you're also they're getting into like fingerprints and stuff like that. The informatics, bioinformatics. So yeah, it's kind of got a whole bunch of stuff that's going along with it now. So.
The second one I did here is a page about introduction to user experience design, but it has a lot of links on here. And here it has a link to a review of this design of everyday things. This is that book I was telling you about, which is really, and it kind of tells you some of, here's the stove example. How many of you have stoves where this is the burners and this is the knobs? It's not a natural mapping.
Yeah.
Natural mapping would be to make the buttons match the burners, the knobs match the burners, but they often don't do that.
Or you have to reach across the hot burner.
Yeah.
Yeah, mine are, yeah.
So this, if you read this article, it gives you a good idea of the gist of the whole book and kind of what some of the categories are. In this book, this article was published in 2010. I read the book in 2005. It's been around for a while, but it's pretty good. And then there's some more articles that are linked through here. So it's kind of a link to a page of links. But here's 15 users weighing in on what is UX design. And I liked this article. It just has different people kind of saying what they think UX design is all about. And then, of course, there's more links in here. Then I have two articles here about effective web design, because just like I've said, web design is so prominent now.
Too long to load.
Here is some, and I liked how they did this, some just nice statements. Some of these, and they even talk about typography and different things for web design. Mobile friendly, so this is pretty good. It used to be when I took user interface in 2005 and we talked about web, it's like use a white background, like these really basic ideas. Then, I built a whole software company on a website with a black background because I wanted to be different, like
rebel.
Yeah. And then the last one, 8 universal web design principles. This one goes into what I was talking about, visual hierarchy. So like here it says, please rank the circles in order of importance. Like it's pretty obvious, right? Just looking at it. Here they talk about the areas that you look at on a page. This divine proportions, the golden ratio, like this whole thing. Once you see that, a lot of web pages are actually built around some of these topics. And then they have all these laws, Hick's law, Fitts law, rule of thirds. So an image should be imagined as divided into 9 equal parts. I mean, there's a lot of really good ideas in here.
Oh, you missed a dog.
What? Is it dog?
Yeah, or you missed a dog.
Oh, I see it.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
Oh,
Oh, yeah. Everybody's like, oh, there's a dog.
Did you guys not take psychology? Like,
no.
So, I mean, this is a pretty long article, but it has
Sociology.
a lot of good
took that too.
stuff in it. So, all right. So next week, chapters 9 and 10. 9 is databases. 10 is like 10 is like you've implemented the software, kind of what's next. Homework assignment will come out sometime, it probably will be next Tuesday. I might get it out early if
Take
you want to
your
start
time,
working on it. And
It's-
then, so post next week, we'll schedule a midterm. And I think I'm just going to do it so it's on Moodle and you can take it whenever you want, not use up class time on it. Like I'll give you a couple days and you can just hop on and take it and open whatever. open book stuff. And then we'll have 10 weeks to start working through the project. So I'll start piecing out, you need to work on this. We'll review the topic of like requirements, and then you'll work on requirements, and we'll kind of phase forward throughout the rest. I want to try to build, now I kind of know where the end point of the book is, try to kind of pencil in a schedule of how we'll phase through that. So the trick is I want to do design and I want to do requirements, but I also want to get into development as early as possible so you guys aren't trying to cram a whole thing into like a week or something, So we'll probably cheat a little bit on some of those things and start developing earlier than you would in a real project, just to help you. I haven't looked at your homeworks yet, but I will over the next days, just so that mainly for the project idea, just to say like, yeah, this is good, let's revise, or let's talk and come up with something else. So, all right, no right or wrong answers on that though. So, okay, I will see you guys Tuesday.
I always thought in the CS degree you should have to take a